Okay, seeing no one else, we'll now go back to the regular agenda item number 4, discussion of time clock software.
Am I presenting this? I know Tracy just explained, Madam Chair, that the time clock software is starting to kind of filter out, and there's not anyone to come in and repair it or make changes to it if we have issues. My issue with the time clock software, and this is just my opinion as the county manager, is that the office staff in this, the administrative staff in this building, excluding elected officials, chief deputies, and myself, and grant-appointed employees, have to clock in and clock out. Dispatchers don't clock in and clock out. Deputies don't clock in and clock out. Road employees don't clock in and clock out. Grant employees don't. I'm sure that the elected officials or the department heads that are here can give you more of a history on it, but I think that it's not really fair for some of the employees to have to clock in and some of them not to have to clock in. So my recommendation would be to do away with the time clock software, but at the time that it was implemented, I know that the elected officials and the department heads were very much in favor of having time clocks. So I would ask you to open it up to anyone else here.
Okay, thank you very much. So we now are at the podium for anyone who'd like to comment on this. Betty? Maybe next, Betty, I'm sorry.
Nancy Brockman again. What is the nature of time clock software getting obsolete? We still have 24 hours in a day. There still are computer programs that have been established. I don't know anything about the issues. Can you give me a clue? Like, do you need somebody that knows a particular computer language that not many people have anymore?
Commissioners, County Manager, the current time clock program that we're using has never actually worked correctly. So we've been working within parameters that we're not too clear of how to make it work for us. It is quite old. I believe it was 2004 when we installed it. And so it's not getting obsolete so much as it's getting old, and it's kind of on its last leg, and it's not doing for us what it could be doing. I know that I've contacted other counties to see who uses time clocks, who doesn't, and it's all over the board as well. Some use them, some don't. There are programs out there that would better fit our need, where we can put readers into buildings outside of the county administrative offices so that they could clock in and clock out, you know. And then there's programs out there that can also do more of the work that we need it to do, as far as plugging in the times into time, worksheets and things like that, things that we're doing manually now. So it's kind of 6 of this and half a dozen of the other, but it is not becoming obsolete as much as it's old and it's on its last leg.
The bigger problem with the software is it's actually crashed twice, where we've lost all the time clock data, all the reader data went away because the software, it was downloaded from the reader and then the software itself crashed. We had to start from square one. We had to uninstall it, reinstall it, and it worked for a little while and crashed again. And it's starting to have those same problems where it looks like it's fixing to crash again. The readers work. There's one reader in the building. The reader works. There was a badge maker that was purchased with the original software that we had to replace already. But the badge maker serves more than just the time clock. They use it for identification badges for EOC and the sheriff and those type of things. So that's kind of a different issue. The company that makes that software has gone out of business. There still is technical support, but they haven't released any new software upgrades or any new releases of it. So there's nothing that really upgrades to fix the internal problems that are running in the system. So that's why we're at this point where it's not going to keep working, and if we have to completely reinstall, every 2 months, then that's not a good use of our time in the manager's office. So
That's a good point. Thank you, Betty.
Betty Caver, Torrance County Assessor. I guess I have, my first question, I have a comment, but I have a question because I don't know how, since I have been here, it has always been a time clock, and that is, and I understand that we need, most likely there'll have to be a change anyway, just because of the functionality of what we have right now. But how do we keep track, or like, how do they keep track in the road department? I never really realized that they didn't clock in and out. How do we keep track of the time? I'm thinking of if we're just writing it down, or like if I have to police when people come in and I'm standing there and write down what time they come in and out, because we have to keep track of their vacation time and their sick time through that system, and for payment of for their payment of their time. So first of all, I have that question.
Could you maybe not handle it through a sign-in sheet when they get in?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What did they do before? Where are places that don't have time clocks, how do they keep track of time and people coming in and being in on time for work and the overtime issues and things like that? So I'm asking that first.
In the road department, they know they all start at a certain time. If they're starting at their station, if they go directly to their grader, then they'll call in on the radio, they'll call their supervisor. So their supervisors make a mental note, and it's easier for them to acknowledge if someone's late versus who's on time. So if there's somebody late for work, then they know that the supervisors keep track of it. Same in dispatch.
Okay. I'm thinking there has to be a set of, there would have to be some kind of
Like checks and balances.
process, checks and balances that would have to be uniform across everybody in the whole, all the employees, that we're all doing it the same way, that we're all keeping track of it the same way, or they're following a procedure. Maybe it could be a little different. Well, text me, or you don't text, so then you're gonna have to call me or write it down or something. But there needs to be a written policy of how it would be handled if you didn't do it. I understand there's a policy through the computer that when you sign into the computer, it's like a time clock there. And I know that wouldn't work probably totally because there are people like the deputies in the road department aren't signing on to a computer every day. So, but that's just a thought. I mean, that would work really well in my office.
Before you go to your next question, I don't want to be rude and interrupt you.
Sure.
However, Michelle, did your comment and Cindy, your comment, was it an answer maybe to one of her questions, or is it something different?
Well, she had
I'm
asked
sorry.
about the road department, and I only can answer for the sheriff. I know that when our
You gotta
deputies
come on up, Michelle.
And then you can come up too, Cindy, if you want to address this issue.
I was just going to answer for the deputies' part. When they come on shift, they call into dispatch and say we're on. And when they're off, when they're through with their shift, then they kind of clock out with dispatch. So that's a record that we always have if there's ever a question. There's never been a question.
Thank you, Michelle. Cindy, did you want to comment on that?
Well, we're so small, it's easy to keep track of people, but we have an entire bulletin board. I buy this huge calendar, and if the girls are taking a day or switching a day, or if they come in late, I immediately go back and mark it on there, had a flat tire, was 2 hours late, if they don't switch it out, or whatever, and then when it hits my desk, it's on my calendars. So once I check over all the timesheets to see what's happened, there's occasion that somebody will have to be off for a doctor's appointment and they'll forget, it'll end up on a timesheet, and I do all the documentation on my stuff so I can double check what they do. But that's the way it was for years and years, the time clock. And we do call into dispatch too, so they have a record from that.
I know, because when I worked for the phone company, we didn't clock in and clock out, and there were a zillion more employees just at the Albuquerque office than there are in the whole county. And so I know it can be done. I'm just a little nervous about it because I do want to keep track of that. And since, like, a road department in the sheriff's department, I have a large office, and it's hard to keep track of that. I'm sure I could work around that and get to a point, but I do think we need, before we go to that no time clock at all, there has got to be a specific policy to keep everybody in the same area in the range for any people that are coming in late or, I'm not saying it'll happen, but I just want to make sure there's some kind of a control and also something that we could go back to people and say, hey, this is the policy and this is how it works. You have to abide by this policy. And have maybe,
I get
issues.
your point. Like,
So
to hold people
that's all I
accountable.
want to say.
But could you not, and I know we're getting the personnel policy we're working on that. But couldn't you do like a inter-office communication with the memo, saying this is an internal memorandum and this is what I expect as somebody who oversees this office, and then have an acknowledgement to that? And then maybe a
That would work,
signage?
but again, I know we have issues anyway with different offices, and I know, again, that's department head and how, and the control in the office, each office, because they don't do that in that office, why do we have to do it in our office situations? So that's why I'd like to see a good standard personnel policy that discusses that. So that was, because going back to manual isn't so bad. That's Nick's favorite, so I'm going to make him in charge of keeping all that record because he's old school and he likes to do things the old-fashioned way anyway. He likes paper, so we'll do that.
Okay, I have a hand raised, Mr. Gotti? I'm gonna call him Gotti all the time.
I have a quick question while he's coming up. How many people do we have actually using the time clock right now?
But I can't remember.
Yeah, Miss-
Ballpark, 30?
Everybody in this building, with the exception of anybody who is an exempt employee who does not qualify for overtime. Trish from the road department does clock in and clock out, the equipment operator does not. Because I don't actually,
Mr. Gotti?
here specifically.
I like Vanessa's suggestions. I think that one of the things is really the integrity of the supervisor. It comes down to make sure that each department has a policy for time clocking. And there are going to be arguments and disagreements over, well, mine doesn't, my people do it this way and somebody else do it the other way, and some are going to get jealous, but it really comes down to making sure that the supervisors are responsible for the time clocking that works for the department. If you over-standardize it, it's going to be kind of like a bad computer program that hopefully you're going to get rid of from what the description is. So I really think you need to look at and make sure the supervisors do their job, and that's part of their responsibility.
Thank you very
To
much.
do it in the way that is appropriate for each department.
Thank you. So why don't we come to the table now? What are your thoughts as we're listening to this? And I know that it's getting later.
I've never been much on a time clock. I've always thought that a time clock was either a tattletale if you had a employee that might have been abusing it, but I can understand the documentation for administrative employees coming in. I think that field employees are a horse of a different color. But I think it boils down to what Mr. Gotti said, is that, the integrity of the supervisor. If you've got an employee that is habitually late, it needs to be addressed to that employee. And if you need a time clock to show that they're late, then you've got a problem probably with the whole section. I'm not much one on, very much on, did you get the job done? And if you have to, but the time clock, if we have one that doesn't work and we want to use it, then we surely need to get it going.
Okay, Commissioner?
I was just finding out numbers, so we've got 25 to 30 people who actually use it out of 100.
I'm of the opinion that we should do away with it. I mean, there is an honor system, and we have supervisors that need to hold their staff accountable, and I'm sure that they will. They have in the past. I'm sure they'll do it in the future. That's all I'm going to say on that.
just have one quick comment. Either way we decide, if we decide to do away with it, we need to set a target date because we need to revamp policies and procedures because we're right in the middle of an audit. And if we change the horse in midstream, then I've got to give them a new policy so that because they're gonna sit with us pretty soon to watch the payroll process. And if it's going to change, we need to say, this is our new policy and this is what we're following. This isn't what we did when you were auditing for that time period. The other thing is we're going to need a training period because we have employees that since they worked here have only used the time clock. They're not used to keeping track of their time because the time clock keeps track of it for them. So there's gonna need to be a learning curve, and we're gonna need to revamp the timesheet because the timesheet does not capture time in and time out. It only captures number of hours worked each day. So I think you've got employees that are used to, I got here at this time, I left here at that time, type of thing, so we might need to look at that. A little background on the time clock, the reason why we never did require the offices, like road department and sheriff, those were the two that were the hardest, was because they start at their blade or they start in their unit when they come on duty. The other ones, there are options that we can have remote readers, we can put them in the other facilities that are stationary employees that report to one location, so that is an option. So I just wanted you to have that information, so you know that.
A little more background, I read through the minutes in 2004 when they initially decided to go with the time clock. And the reason was because we have different personalities in our department heads. Some may watch their departments a little closer than others. Some may require a little more of their employees than others, watching exactly what time they're coming in and coming out. But more than that, it looks like the employees were trying to hold each other more accountable, and there was a lot of finger pointing and saying, they come in late all the time and you never catch it. And so that kind of looks like why this whole thing came to be.
Thank you. I would recommend to Joy that possibly just come back to us at another meeting with an anticipated date of when you'd like to start it, since you guys will talk amongst yourselves as far as training and just let us know when you think would be a good time to implement it. Because are we all on the same page?
Yes, I believe.
Yes.
Thank you. Just for the record, do we know what the estimate is on some of the new time clock softwares that we've looked at? I think you said Nick had it, and there he is.
There's one that we looked at, but there's another program that just came up that looks like it can do a whole lot more than this other one, but we don't have a price estimate because they have to come out and evaluate what you need and what components of the software.
As Annette mentioned, I've been here for several years and I've clocked in, not clocked in, worked 8 hours, worked 10 hours, worked 5 days a week, worked 4 days a week, so.
What do you recommend, sir?
I've clocked in and I've not clocked in. I don't have a problem clocking in and out. It keeps me honest, it keeps me fair and equitable. All my staff appreciates it. If there's a question, I can go to Annette and/or Finance and tell them when were they clocked in or not. If I'm not there, I'm not too sure who's gonna watch them. You gotta set certain parameters, who's gonna watch the people if I'm not there. It might be a big brother to some people, but it keeps my employees honest. To answer your question, we have researched this when the other software failed. As with any other type of software, you're at the whim of the software. Some of the software we looked at that Chavez County runs, they got 2 different scenarios, which is what we currently have, the software and the barcode reader runs about $2,800. The majority of that cost is your barcode reader. Our badges right now are barcoded with our employee number, so it tracks the employee number. So when I clock in the morning, it shows my employee number, and when I leave at night. The other software, which I thought was a little bit more conducive, but then there was some question, who's really clocking in? The scenario with this software, it's the same provider, but you clock in as when you sign into your computer. So when I come in the morning and I get to my station and I log onto my computer, I have to fire another piece of applet on my computer, and then I clock in there. And that one was $1,200.
Okay, thank you.
it's not expensive, really.
No, I think the bulk of the time and effort is getting it installed and making sure everybody's accustomed to it, and now we're not gonna be clocking in here, you're gonna clock in there.
So is
Or
that
not.
an added expense too? Because I know we've talked about this through the years about trying to budget for new time clock software, and if we're talking $3,000, that's really not.
Correct, yeah, it just depends, if you go with the software version, we just install it on everybody that's currently clocking in. If we don't go that route, we already have the mechanism in place for the barcode reader, we just gotta replace the barcode reader to match the software.
Okay.
And the history, just, I think there was a few comments from the audience, the software works, you're just at the whim of the software, you know, the computer might have an issue, so then the software doesn't fire up, you know. Technology is good when it works, but it's, quotations crappy when it doesn't, so. And we've had that since '04, and the commission at that time agreed that maybe it was a good avenue to pursue, and we've updated it and kept it up as much as possible with no customer support, and when it did crash, that one payroll, it was quite difficult for payroll to figure out who clocked in.
So is it possible to get other readers in other places?
Yes, with these two software providers, yes.
And how much more is that?
I don't have that. I wasn't prepared for that question.
I mean, I don't know, I'm torn because I'm in favor of it being the big brothers. Because there are those that you would hope that aren't, but are gonna show up late and not stay late or do whatever. And so, okay, well, since we don't have a consensus, I think that since we were gonna bring it back at a different time anyway, why don't, when we bring it back on the agenda at that time, look at if we went without it, this would be a good time to move forward without it. If we decide to stay with it, these are the readers that we like, this is the cost, and how to do it fairly throughout the county. That way, we address every issue at that time and then make a final decision. Commissioner Freidberger, would you agree?
I agree with that.
Okay, so why don't we do that?
Okay.